Imagine being told you're not good enough, that you don't belong, yet you push forward, determined to prove them wrong. This is the story of one man's fight against prejudice and impossible odds to make history. How far would you go to achieve your dream when the whole world is against you? Carl Brashear was born in the quiet, dusty fields of Sonora, Kentucky, where the weight of poverty was a daily companion and dreams seemed as far away as the horizon. From the start, life didn't offer Carl much hope of escaping the sharecropping fields his family worked, but Carl wasn't one to accept what life handed him. His father's words, firm and resolute, stayed with him throughout his childhood. "Don't quit on me, boy. Be the best." Those words would fuel Carl's spirit, ignite his ambition, and carry him through every battle he would later face. Carl grew up with a fierce belief that he was destined for something greater, something beyond the limitations imposed by race and circumstance. It wasn't enough for him to just get by, he was determined to rise, even if no one believed he could. In 1948, Carl took his first real step toward that dream. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy, eager to break free from the cycle of poverty and create a future full of opportunity. But upon arriving, Carl quickly realized that his fight had just begun. The Navy, still segregated and rooted in outdated traditions, offered little room for men like him. They assigned him to the kitchen, one of the few roles available to African American sailors. Most men would have accepted this fate, kept their heads down, and done their duty. But Carl's spirit was restless. He knew he was destined for more. One day, while working below deck, Carl's attention was drawn to a group of men moving with purpose and precision. Navy divers. These elite men were executing a complex underwater mission, and Carl watched in awe. It wasn't just their skill or strength that fascinated him, it was the respect they commanded, the sense of purpose they carried. Here, Carl crossed paths with Master Chief Billy Sunday. Billy was a man of legend within the diving community, a fearless, talented diver with a reputation for defiance. But Billy was also a man with scars, both seen and unseen. He had disobeyed a direct order during the mission, saving a fellow diver's life, but the act of heroism cost him his career. The Navy grounded him, pushing him to a desk job at the school, a role he deeply resented. Something stirred deep within Carl, and from that moment on, he knew what he wanted. He wasn't going to stay in the kitchen. He was going to be one of them. He was going to dive. No black man had ever been accepted into the Navy's diving program. When Carl arrived at the school, he quickly realized that acceptance was only the first of many obstacles. The school was a battleground, not just of physical endurance but of racial prejudice. The head instructor, Mr. Pappy, made no effort to hide his disdain for Carl. Pappy, a hardened man shaped by the Navy's long history of exclusion, saw Carl as an intruder, someone who didn't belong. Every day was a test, and not just the kind that measured skill. Carl was given the hardest tasks, pushed harder than the others, and constantly ridiculed by his peers. The other trainees, all white men, joined in, mocking Carl and refusing to accept him as one of their own. It would have been enough to break most men. But Carl wasn't most men. He remembered his father's words, "Be the best," and used them to keep going, pushing through every insult, every grueling exercise. At first, Billy took little interest in Carl. To him, Carl's fight was pointless. A black man wasn't going to make it as a Navy diver, no matter how hard he worked. Years of fighting his own battles had left Billy jaded, and he saw Carl's determination as futile. But as time went on, Billy couldn't help but notice Carl's resilience. Carl wasn't like the others. He wasn't just trying to survive, he was trying to excel, to defy expectations. Something about that reminded Billy of his younger self. During a dangerous training exercise, Carl's instincts kicked in when one of his fellow recruits, a man who had often ridiculed him, was in danger. Without hesitation, Carl dove in, risking his own life to save the man. It was a selfless act of courage, the kind of heroism that should have been celebrated. But when the Navy handed out commendations, they gave the credit to someone else, a white man. Carl watched as his bravery was erased, but he didn't let the injustice crush him. He knew that his fight wasn't about recognition, it was about proving that nothing could break his spirit. But the road ahead remained treacherous. One night, Carl found himself face to face with Billy in a bar. The air was thick with tension as Billy, drinking heavily, challenged Carl. It wasn't just a test of words, it was a test of will. Billy, sharp-tongued and hardened, threw insults Carl's way, daring him to falter. But Carl didn't back down. He stood his ground, showing Billy that he wasn't intimidated by the legendary diver or the harsh realities of the Navy. It was a defining moment, a battle of strength, not of fists, but of spirit. In Carl, Billy saw a reflection of his own fight, a man willing to go toe-to-toe with the world, even when the odds were against him. As Carl advanced in his training, he found a source of strength beyond the Navy. He met Jo, a woman who became his anchor through the storm of challenges. Their relationship provided Carl with stability and love, but it wasn't without strain. Jo saw the toll that Carl's relentless pursuit of his dream was taking, not just on himself but on their future. The long hours, the emotional distance, and the constant battles weighed heavily on them both. Yet, through it all, Jo remained by Carl's side, understanding the depth of his ambition, even as it demanded more sacrifices. As Carl moved closer to completing his training, the tension between him and Billy Sunday only seemed to grow. Billy, now watching Carl with a grudging respect, couldn't help but be impressed by Carl's sheer determination. Carl had overcome every challenge, every insult, and every grueling test thrown at him. The two men, in many ways, were mirror images, stubborn, fiercely driven, and unyielding. The final test came during one of the toughest challenges in the program. The recruits were required to assemble a pump underwater, in freezing, pitch-black conditions. It was a test that demanded both physical and mental endurance, and Carl's classmates were eager to see him fail. They sabotaged him, scattering the pump parts across the ocean floor, hoping to break his spirit. But Carl had something they didn't. He had a deep well of determination, built on years of pushing through adversity. Slowly, piece by piece, Carl found every part, assembling the pump and completing the test. It wasn't just a victory, it was a declaration. Carl had proved he wasn't going to be defeated by sabotage or by prejudice. Despite his jaded exterior, a part of Billy wanted Carl to succeed, even though he doubted it was possible. Then came the mission that would change Carl's life forever. In 1966, a hydrogen bomb fell into the sea off the coast of Spain, and Carl, now a qualified diver, was assigned to the recovery team. It was a dangerous and critical operation, one that required the utmost precision. During the recovery, disaster struck. A heavy steel pipe, hoisted from the ocean floor, snapped and came crashing down on Carl's leg, crushing it beyond repair. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Carl was airlifted to a hospital, where doctors delivered the grim news: his leg would need to be amputated. For any other diver, this would mean the end of their career, but Carl was not like other men. The injury was devastating, but Carl's will was stronger than the pain. Where others saw the end of the road, Carl saw another challenge to overcome. Despite the doctor's warnings and the Navy's doubts, Carl refused to accept that his diving career was over. His dream of returning to the water, of proving himself capable even with one leg, burned brighter than ever. Against all advice, Carl made a decision that shocked everyone: he would not give up. He committed himself to returning to active duty, determined to dive again with a prosthetic leg. Carl's decision left those around him in disbelief, especially his wife, Jo. She had stood by his side through every trial, always his strongest supporter, but now she struggled to understand. Jo had seen the toll Carl's relentless pursuit of his dream had taken on him, and now, after losing his leg, she feared for his future. In a heart-wrenching confrontation, Jo pleaded with Carl to give up the fight. She begged him to accept his injury, to find peace in what he had already achieved. But Carl, as always, was unwavering. Diving wasn't just a job, it was his life, his purpose. He had come too far, fought too hard, to quit now. Carl's words, spoken with quiet but unshakable conviction, cut through the doubt. "This is who I am," he told Jo. "I can't walk away from it." Carl Brashear faced his most challenging battle yet, not underwater this time, but against his own body. The physical pain of rehabilitation was relentless, but Carl, the man who had never known the word quit, approached it with the same unyielding determination that had carried him through diving school. Every step he took was agonizing, yet he pushed forward with a singular focus, not just to walk again, but to run, train, and dive. The Navy placed a new challenge in front of Carl. He would need to pass a series of grueling tests. Despite their differences, Billy had come to respect Carl's relentless drive. "He wants to train him," knowing full well that the Navy would be watching Carl's every move, looking for any excuse to fail him. Billy pushed Carl harder than anyone ever had before, knowing that only perfection would be enough to silence the doubters. One of the most significant challenges Carl faced was walking 12 steps while wearing the full diving suit, including the helmet and nearly 300 pounds of gear. For a man with 2 legs, it was a test of strength and endurance. For Carl, with only one, it seemed almost impossible. With Billy by his side, offering words of encouragement, Carl prepared for the test. As Carl took his first step, the tension in the air was palpable. The other divers, officers, and onlookers stood in silence, watching in disbelief. With each step, Carl's body strained under the weight, sweat dripping down his face. Billy, once doubtful, now shouted from the sidelines, urging Carl to keep moving. Each step was harder than the last, but Carl's focus never wavered. After what felt like an eternity, Carl took the 12th and final step. He collapsed from exhaustion but emerged victorious. The room erupted in applause. Carl had done it. He had proven, with every agonizing step, that even with one leg, he had the strength, the heart, and the determination to be a Navy diver. In 1968, Carl became the first African American in history to achieve this honor. Carl's victory was more than just a personal achievement. It was a triumph over the barriers of racism, over the limits others had tried to impose on him, and over the physical challenges he had faced. He had shattered the expectations of those who doubted him and left a legacy that would inspire generations to come. Carl Brashear's legacy was firmly established as a symbol of triumph against all odds, a man who had redefined what it meant to be a Navy diver. His story, one of perseverance, courage, and an unbreakable spirit, would inspire countless others to chase their dreams, no matter the obstacles that stood in their way.